Surely they should be there for as long as it takes, not for as long as a time constraint that somebody might have put upon them. My name is Peter Bleksley. I'm a former Scotland Yard detective. The new search for evidence in regards to Madeleine McCann's disappearance that is occurring in Portugal, if this was happening in the UK, the police would say this is an intelligence-led operation. So I sincerely hope that the authorities are acting on some credible information that they've either been told or that they've discovered for themselves. In the pictures that we've seen coming from Portugal, there's been a lot of officers, some carrying shovels, rakes and other pieces of equipment. And also we've seen bags being removed. Now I would imagine that this is material that's been gathered for forensic examination. Quite what they were looking for, we don't know yet, but I would suggest it might be human remains, material, fabrics, clothing, things of that nature. So far, I've only seen one boat on the water. As I speak, I'm not aware of any underwater searches being conducted. That's not to say they might not be conducted in the future. When things go into water, they do deteriorate, especially if they've been in there for something as long as 16 years. Bodies deteriorate, clothing and material deteriorates. But there are cases that have been solved when items have been recovered from water many, many years, even decades after an offence has been committed. There was one case where rope was discovered around a corpse, and when that rope was very carefully untangled by forensic scientists, they found traces of DNA within it, even though it had been underwater for years. We'll have to see if there are any thorough and exhaustive underwater searches. At the moment, I haven't seen any evidence of that. In 2008, a privately commissioned company did some searching of the reservoir and I believe some of the land nearby, but we don't know how exhaustive that was. I think they only spent a couple of days or so doing that. And clearly, nothing of any great relevance was discovered then. I sincerely hope that evidence is found during this search, because it's been 16 long years with many false dawns, many hopes being dashed as the inquiry has turned this way and that way. I'm sure that Madeleine's parents are desperate for some firm, irrefutable, concrete evidence to be discovered so that this case can be moved forward and answers can be found. I heard a report the other day that said this search is only going to last 2 days. Now, if that's true, I'm very concerned that a time limit has been put upon the search. Surely, officers should be searching for as long as it takes. They're searching specific areas. It's not like they're doing hundreds of acres on some kind of needle in a haystack inquiry. They're targeting specific areas, and I suspect looking for specific things. So in light of that, surely they should be there for as long as it takes, not for as long as a time constraint that somebody might have put upon them. These resources that are down in Portugal doing the searching are expensive. There's lots of police officers from Germany, from Portugal, and apparently detectives from Scotland Yard are there in an overseeing kind of role. Therefore, I think they must be acting on information, a tip-off, or intelligence that they've discovered themselves, which they think is credible. Every law enforcement agency has budgetary restraints these days, and they have to justify the expenditure. This is not a wild goose chase. They are there for a specific reason. And I sincerely hope that some of those bags we've been seen taken away contain the evidence that we all want. A couple of years ago, the chief German prosecutor, Mr. Wolters, went public and in a very bullish way said words to the effect of, "We know who did it, but we just can't prove it." Well, knowing something and proving something are two very different things. And I think he was very unwise to be so forthright in using that kind of language. In the UK, of course, someone is innocent until proven guilty. We don't have prosecutors from the CPS going to the media and saying, "We know this person did it," before they're even charged. They only say that after somebody has been convicted. My huge concern is that should Mr. Bruckner ever be charged in connection with Madeleine's disappearance, that a smart barrister could rock back on his heels and say to the judge, "It's impossible for my client to get a fair trial." And I fear he might be right. Bruckner, who has not been charged, let us all remember that, he has not been charged with any crime in connection with Madeleine's disappearance as I speak, would simply walk away from a court a free man. That's my fear. That's my concern. In the world of crime and punishment, words are important. And I think Mr. Wolters was a bit too loose-lipped. I'd have been extremely confident of this search delivering the evidence we all want it to if, for example, a suspect had been at that location, handcuffed to a police officer and pointing at various spots, almost directing the police where to search. Because then you could say, look, there's a suspect. He's telling them where he put things, where he did things. But of course, that's not been the case this week. It's an extremely difficult thing to take somebody who's imprisoned in one country to another country. The permissions, the applications, the process you would have to go through to achieve that would almost be impossible. And besides, let's not forget, Bruckner has denied having any involvement whatsoever in Madeleine's disappearance. I'm sure that Madeleine's parents and her siblings now, who are young adults, must go through a lot of hurt when these kind of searches take place. If it was a child of mine, and I'm very grateful that it's not, I would forever hope against hope of a happy conclusion to such a case, and failing that, a successful prosecution of whoever was responsible. I have considerable sympathy for the McCanns. The torture must simply go on and on and on. My personal opinion, and it is just that, is that sadly, I don't think Madeleine will ever be found alive. I would very much like to be proved wrong on that. However, I remain hopeful about this search. I am an optimistic kind of bloke, and I suppose my hope is driven more by a desire to see this case solved than any particular insight into the case, because that I do not have. I have not had access to the police files. I have not seen any of the items that have been seized. But as they say, hope springs eternal.